Jaded Creep here. The video, or this video, is going to be about some kind of random TFL, incel, MGTOW type stuff in regards to attraction, man and women, male-female attraction. There was a YouTuber with top quality videos, went by the name of Asad Nassif, and he had about 2 or 3 videos. They were each about an hour and a half to over 2 hours in length, and they were chock full of excellent information, useful information. No bullshit. But he decided to take his videos down because, let's face it, and I understand what he's talking about. A lot of people that watch YouTube or manosphere type channels, they want flash. They want to be entertained. They want videos dropped daily. You know, some of them having little to no useful information in them. You know, that's fine. That's cool. I get it. Most people get more subscribers, etc. But a lot of these YouTubers with a massive amount of subs and viewers, they're spitting out what I would consider incorrect, inaccurate, and harmful information to men. And I'm specifically referring to the gentlemen that push the lookism theory. They're leading men astray. And I think that's kind of wrong. Some of them are even selling products. So, again, to me, it's just common sense. But if you're trying to sell something that improves your physique or your social value or whatever the hell the product's purported to do, you're not going to want to make videos like my videos or Asad Nassif's videos or Hugh Traviata's videos, because they're not glamorous. In fact, the truth sometimes hurts. Bitter pill to swallow, but in the end, you'll be better off. But if someone's got something to sell, of course they're going to push, you know, if they say you got to get ripped and a 6-pack ab and you got to get swole and you got to get yada, 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 and then they have some supplement to sell, of course they're going to push lookism as part of the package, right? Anyways, Asad Nassif took his videos down because he felt they weren't reaching a wide enough audience and nobody was understanding them. Sadly enough, I agree with what he did, because most guys, they'll listen to his videos and stuff I do, and then they'll probably just laugh and think that, you know, think to themselves, oh, these guys are freaking crazy. They're on drugs. What the hell are they talking about? I don't know why they're so resistant to new information and ideas, but hey, whatever. So, Asad Nassif, a lot of the, not all, but a lot of the information that he was talking about, it came from the work of a Dr. Brian G. Gilmartin. And I just recently purchased this book and read it, and I recommend that anybody listening to this do the same. The book is titled The Shy Man Syndrome, and the subtitle is Why Men Become Love Shy and How They Can Overcome It. Remember, this is by a professional, a top guy in his field. This isn't by some hack. This involved controlled studies, and it's also an old book. So, since that time, I mean, I think this came out sometime in the 80s, so things have gotten a lot more extreme and a lot worse. So, anyways, what I'd like to say, after reading this book a couple times, I realized that all the assumptions I made, all the observations I made, all the things I experienced, the opinions I had currently, were all, this book proved them to be correct. So, in saying that, I'm saying sometimes, guys, if you do have an opinion, you come to a conclusion, you might just be right. You know, some people discredit themselves. They think they're stupid or they're not qualified to give an opinion or whatnot. But you are, and a lot of the times, I think Men have an accurate gut instinct. I know they say women do, but they do not. I believe men have a real, skill for like that gut instinct type decision making. So what I'm going to do is make a series of videos where I go over different chapters or topics that I think contain information that is helpful and useful for men. Not the whole book, but I highlighted certain parts. And I'm not going to make this one video because I don't want to make a 2-hour video. I'll try to put this into small, relatively small videos, a series of them. So before I get into this, the doctor defines love shy, Love, and just love shy. That's a guy who is a full-grown adult who basically has never had any form of intimacy or serious relationship with a female, someone of the opposite sex, and they're not gay, like they're a straight guy. So it's literally a guy who's had no experience with women, even though he wants to have experiences. One thing led to another, and it just got to a point where nothing ever happened. And there's nothing wrong with that. Shit happens. And this book explains why that happens very well. But this book can also apply to people who, and this is a large amount of men right now. The number of actual love shy men has exploded in North America and even in Japan. If you look up the hikikomori problem over there, it's the same thing as TFL here. The society and the way it structures does not lend itself to healthy male-female relationships. It doesn't give us access to them either. The online dating world and the options is a mere illusion. And I'm not going to break down why it's an illusion. Some people just don't get it because they're not that smart. But I think you guys know the reason why it's smoke and mirrors and an illusion. And it actually makes matters for men to date women worse. So it's garbage. So anyways, this book can also, it doesn't just apply to love shy men, it applies to men who've gone through like a long so-called dry spell, or they have problems meeting women or talking to them, hooking up with them, etc. And please don't be too annoyed by me flipping through these pages. Okay, so in chapter 1, there's a subsection titled The Gender Factor. And I'm going to read what I highlighted from this section, and I'm going to explain it. So the doctor says, a seldom mentioned factor which I believe increases the shyness and diminishes the self-confidence and self-esteem of young men as compared to that of young women is women do the lion's share of rejecting in male-female relationships. Within marriage, 90% of all divorces are sought by wives and not by husbands. And among courting couples, at least 2/3 of all the breakups are instigated by the female partner. In a well-known 76 study by sociologists Charles Hill, Letitia Peplau, and Zick Rubin, girls terminated most of the steady dating relationships. Even normally self-confident men suffer more than women when relationships are terminated. Some victims of rejection become so emotionally scarred that they no longer can express their feelings even to themselves. I'm going to repeat that. Even normally self-confident men suffer more than women when relationships are terminated. So in this game, men are the ones that feel the pain, or way more pain, not the women. And that also implies that all men are affected. So, you have these illusions of these Don Juans, these Chad and Tyrone guys. I mean, it doesn't matter who it is. It does, being rejected hurts everybody. Okay, the doctor goes on to say, even normally adjusted young men experience significantly fewer serious man-woman relationships before marriage than even very average young women do. That's a key. Listen to what I'm saying. Even normally adjusted young men, like normal men, normally socially adjusted, popular, whatever. Even normally adjusted young men experience significantly fewer serious man-woman relationships before marriage than even very average young women do. What does this mean for men? It means that even the small group of guys that some of us may know or have seen growing up that appear to be having an easy time with the women, even those guys experience way less serious man-women relationships before any marriage happens than even an average young woman. So it means women start dating men much earlier. They have a higher count as far as partners concerned, almost 100% of the time, and they start having sex earlier than men do, and they, up until marriage, probably have had a hell of a lot more sex than every man out there. So what I'd like you guys to do is get this idea out of your head that there's this guy that's the exception, that has, he's got it just as good as women do sexually, because it's an illusion, it's a lie, and this doctor here, via controlled studies, prove this. So, the mythical Chad and Tyrone theory, or these two guys that a lot of these TFL incel guys love to hate. I mean, I know in your minds you think they're living the life of fucking Hugh Hefner and banging anything that moves whenever they want, however they want. No strings attached, but it's not like that. It's not even, women live lives like that. Women are the ones that have all the sex. Women are relationship phobic. Women are the players. They're the gatekeepers of sex, and this here proves some of that. Okay, I'm going to continue with the book. Inasmuch as love shyness blocks and impedes men from living a normal life, and it doesn't do this for women, it is clear that love shyness is a far more momentous problem for men than it is for females. Study after study have presented irrefutable evidence to the effect that men need women a great deal more than women need men. Women who for any reason remain in the single, never married category almost always manage to make an emotionally healthy adjustment. As we have seen, this most assuredly does not hold true for men. That's some powerful shit. And that right there kind of explains the, what we refer to as the thirst. This guy's got the thirst. These men have the thirst. By default, men need women a great deal more than women need men. And single women who for whatever reason remain single, it's not a lot of women, but if they do, they make emotionally healthy adjustments and find fulfilling relationships with their own gender or other guys they remain friends with. This is not true for men. This is not true for men. Okay, there's another subsection here, and I highlighted the following. The doctor says, a person can go through life happily without getting over fears of a public performance. But a person incapable of interacting in informal social situations cannot be happy or content. Shyness in social situations has a deleterious damaging impact on a person's mental health, happiness, and stability. So what he's saying here is, for a lot of these love shy guys, and a lot of people in general, they have no fear of a public presentation, but talking with a woman in informal social situations, a party or a social gathering, you know, they might be incapable of doing it. They might freeze up, they might stutter, who the hell knows? But he says it's very damaging for a human being in terms of mental health, happiness, and stability in the long run. In our highly competitive American society, many people, especially males, do not really know who they actually are. People become themselves. They develop a firm sense of identity only through informal interaction from early childhood onward in friendship and kinship groups. For reasons this book will make clear, a significant minority of American boys grow up friendless as social isolates. Remember, this was published in the 80s, and he's saying this. I wonder if the doctor had any idea what the future would hold. Just how much worse it's gotten. Okay. For most of its victims, love shyness persists and profoundly affects their lives by preventing the development of good interpersonal skills crucial to career and personal success. And secondly, love shyness prevents its victims from developing the networks of informal friendships, which are extremely important for the promotion of career effectiveness, community involvement, marriage partner selection, and even help in avoiding deviant or self-destructive behavior. The next subsection is titled Dating is Important. His findings revealed that the non-daters in high school, non-daters were far less successful than the daters financially, in their careers, and in their overall adjustment. The more socially active a person had been during his or her high school years, the more successful and happy he or she was likely to be 10 years later. Moreover, those young people who had been involved in steady dating relationships in high school tended to be best off 10 years later in terms of economic and career success. These findings were all much stronger for the men than they were for the women. These findings were all much stronger for the men than they were for the women. The socially active women were also better off 10 years later than were the women who had been socially inactive in high school. However, the differences between the socially active and inactive individuals were far greater for the males than for the females. In other words, the 28-year-old men who had not dated in high school were the least successful, happy, and well-adjusted. Guys, this is kind of proof of systems theory. It's not just one thing, a silver bullet that's going to fix your problem. Everything works together. Stuff compounds. It spirals out of control, and it starts at an early age. Okay. And now he talks about fixing these social skills deficits that men may have. He says, deficits in interpersonal skills are much more difficult to remedy in later life than are deficits in intellectual or in technical skills. A person can accumulate book learning at any time of life, but the cultivation of expressive social skills cannot be affected through book learning, nor can it be accomplished like intellectual learning at just any time of life. Very true. This next section in the book is called Dating and General Happiness. What did I highlight? Okay. Of the thousands of correlation coefficients my study produced, the strongest was that relating these two variables: the degree of personal satisfaction with informal boy/girl interaction and general happiness. Simply put, nothing in the entire study correlated more strongly with happiness and general sense of well-being than did extent of satisfaction with amount of informal boy-girl interaction. The correlation between these two factors was positive decimal 65 for the young men and positive decimal 32 for the young women. A related correlation coefficient dealt with the relationship between general happiness and number of dates averaged per month. And this correlation figure was similarly far above average by social science standards, being positive 0.49 for males and positive 0.16 for the females. Another clear indication that women are far more important to men than men are to women. Most researchers today believe that women can find emotionally intimate companionship vis-a-vis their own sex, whereas men can only satisfy their needs for emotional intimacy in the company of women. Furthermore, non-dating females normally manage to develop and maintain social skills and self-confidence in all female peer groups, while non-dating males are usually isolated from social networks involving same-sex peers. Okay, the next section is where I'm going to stop for this video, and it's an interesting one. This subsection of this chapter is called Love as a Powerful Elixir. Okay. In contrast, the UCLA love researchers found mutual love relationships to be associated with a dramatically different kind of symptomatology. Young men who were actively involved in mutual love relationships, where the girl interacted with and loved the young man in return, these men tended to be vibrant. This vibrancy and natural enthusiasm were associated with 1. Better grades in school, 2. An increased capacity to concentrate, 3. Better and more efficient use of time, 4. Increased participation in social activities with their own gender, 5. Better appetite, 6. An increased ability to sleep soundly, 7. An ability to remain effective with less sleep than they had required prior to falling in love, 8. Improved overall health, and 9, an increased attentiveness to all facets of personal appearance and grooming, and 10, an outward appearance and general ambiance that made their friends and acquaintances view them as looking better, more alive and vibrant than they had formerly known them to be. One of the most important findings to emerge from this research was that 1, men who were involved in reciprocated love relationships tended to exude extremely bright, very strong Kirlian auras, whereas 2, men who were involved in unreciprocated infatuations tended to have very weak, or in quotes, sick auras. And unreciprocated infatuations means a situation where a guy's obsessed with some chick that doesn't even know he exists, right? So it's an imbalanced energy exchange. Okay. Dr. Thelma Moss, one of America's most respected psi researchers, specializes in Kirlian photography. This is a form of electrical photography which permits the photographing of the human aura, which is the electromagnetic energy force field that suffuses the human body and holds it together. Dr. Moss had her laboratory in the same building as the Love Laboratory, and she took advantage of the opportunity to photograph the Kirlian auras of 1, those in reciprocated love relationships, and 2, those not in love, and 3, those involved in unrequited, unreciprocated infatuations. Involvement in reciprocal love relationships was found to benefit women in much the same ways that it benefited men, and this included the Kirlian aura. However, the findings were substantially weaker for the women than they were for the men. To be sure, The experience of being in love did not harm any of the women studied, but being in love tended to have a much more nearly neutral impact upon the women subjects than it had upon the male subjects. In one significant respect, the women studied were better off than men. In particular, women were found to be substantially less susceptible than men to becoming involved in non-productive, non-reciprocated romantic infatuations of the sort which the researchers found to give rise to the first quite negative set of symptoms. Well, in my opinion, that's no surprise. Women just have more options. Okay. Finally, when women did become involved in unreciprocated romantic infatuations, the effect upon their Kirlian auras tended to be minimal. In other words, unrequited love tended to very adversely affect the corona of a young man's Kirlian aura. The effect of unrequited love feelings upon a woman's aura tended to be minimal. On the other hand, active involvement in a real love relationship tended to galvanize a young man's Kirlian aura into a brilliant, full-bodied glow. Active involvement in a genuine love relationship appears to constitute life-enhancing medicine for a young man. It represents rich fertilizer for the cultivation of social self-confidence and expressive interpersonal skills. Okay. They're talking about the aura. So, as we can see, we'll say love-shy men or men in these unreciprocated in love infatuations, TFL men, somehow, whatever. If you were to photograph their auras with Kirlian photography, you would see that many of these men have these dampened, weak, dark-colored auras. And being in a relationship tends to fix this apparent problem. So by just reading this, you would think, oh, okay, so there's some special magic, heavenly power that women have that if I get in a relationship with one, I'm going to be healthy and my aura is going to glow. That's not what's going on here. In my past videos, I talked about introverted men or men with sensitive sensory processing systems, etc. And I believe that most men that find themselves in TFL, incel, whatever, womanless life situations are of that type of temperament or disposition. Those types of people feel stress or they experience stressors much more extremely than do non-sensitive people. So any stressor will affect them more. And their systems are easily agitated and they're always firing off. When your body's constantly having a stress response and being rejected by people, you know, it's a stressor for the human race, being rejected or cast out from the group. But as we see, women are more important to men than men are to women. And if a man desires to be in a reciprocal love relationship with a woman and he never can, and he's constantly being stimulated by pictures of, you know, nude women, pornography, TV shows showing people having sex, couples on TV everywhere. It's a stressor. It's gonna keep stressing them. When you have a stress response, you have a release of cortisol. If cortisol is continuously flooding your system, it's toxic. It's weakening your immune system, and when that goes down, so does your aura. So you don't need a woman to have a glow to your aura. You just got to get over this stress response you're having to not having a woman around. And to do that, you need leverage. And if you're by chance mentally ill, you have an anxiety problem, you may need some medication, you need to practice meditation, you need to get some hobbies, you need to start doing some form of exercise and stop fixating on these women. And I can tell you right now, the majority of these women here in the West aren't worth it. They've been poisoned. So I know I can't get that across to you right now, but trust me, I'm at a point where I'm like, there's no reason why I would want to even look for a woman right now. And I mean that. Because the options are horrible. And the very little options that are out there are horrible. So anyways, that's what I believe is likely going on with that diminished aura of men. So in my next video, I'm going to do some more passages from this book and explain more of this stuff, because this is the type of thing that Assad Nassif was talking about in his video. So until next time, Jaded Creep.